Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday webinar. We're so glad you could join us today for what promises to be an insightful and engaging webinar. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by Zoll Medical as we explore how modern safety solutions can help create a safer, more compliant workplace. Whether you're joining us from across the country or tuning in from abroad, we truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be here. We know how valuable your time is, and we're confident that what you'll learn today will be both practical and impactful. So every year, cardiac arrest and traumatic injuries claim hundreds of thousands of lives, and many of these emergencies happen in the workplace. While these events are often sudden and unexpected, being prepared can be the difference between life and death. In this session, we'll take a closer look at how organizations like yours can implement modern emergency response tools such as AEDs and app-enhanced trauma kits to be ready when seconds count. You'll also hear how these solutions not only offer peace of mind, but also help ensure your workplace stays compliant with federal, safety, and state regulations. Before we jump into the conversation, I'd like to take a moment to introduce someone very special who will be leading us through today's session. Our host brings a wealth of industry experience and a genuine passion for workplace safety. We're lucky to have him here with us today to guide the discussion and help us make the most of this time together. Let me take a moment to introduce Ryan Bergen. He is the Global Associate Marketing Professional from Orlando, specializing in Stop the Bleed trauma kits and AEDs. He received his Stop the Bleed training and certification from the American College of Surgeons at the California Hospital Medical Center and helps drive adoption of Mobilize, which is Zoll's medical line of smart app driven Stop the Bleed approved trauma kits. So Ryan aims to drive awareness that critical life saving interventions can come from anyone equipped with proper knowledge and tools. So take it away, Ryan.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that great intro, Gail. It's very nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Wednesday to join in on this presentation. If you could drop where you're from in chat, I would love to hear from you guys about where you're tuning in from. I will say I'm over on the West Coast, so I've still got my coffee. This is a morning thing for me. If you're on the East Coast of the U.S., hopefully, you've got a lunch and, you can kick back and enjoy today's featured presentation. And if you're coming from another country, would love to hear about that as well. So tune in and chat. I'll try and keep an eye out to see what you guys are saying. And yeah, so today we're going to be talking about workplace safety. We're going to be talking about a number of common workplace accidents and afflictions that claim a lot of lives every year, and how the odds of survival can be turned on their head with the right preparation and the right tools. Like Gail said, my name's Ryan Bergen. I see we got someone from Boston and someone from DC. That's great. And I work in product marketing at Zoll Medical. And if you're not familiar with Zoll Medical produces a variety of software and hardware solutions with the goal of treating all sorts of cardiopulmonary and respiratory ailments. But arguably, Zoll is best known for being the largest global manufacturer of AEDs, or automated external defibrillators. And that's going to be a big part of our presentation today. But just a quick little background about myself. Like I said, my name is Ryan. I come from Orlando, Florida. So if there's anybody in the chat from Orlando, Florida, let me hear you, because truly one of my favorite places on earth. And so I was born and raised in Orlando, Florida till I was 18, when I moved up to the Northeast, all the way up to Boston, where I went to school at Northeastern University. And Northeastern is actually where I first met all the folks from Zoll, because their office is out in Chelmsford. And while I was studying, I made some friends at Zoll, started working there part-time as an intern, and just absolutely fell in love with the mission, absolutely loved the drive of the people that I worked with, and just how much commitment that they had to making the world a safer place and stopping preventable deaths. Left a tremendous impact on me before I even graduated from school. And so actually, once I finished up my studies, I applied and luckily got a job at Zoll. And so I've been there ever since. They've stayed with me through a move out west. So now I'm located in the Los Angeles area, and I just get to spend a lot of time talking about creating safe workplaces, spreading awareness for cardiac arrest and other common afflictions. So it's really, it's been a pleasure to work with Zoll, and I still absolutely love the people here. So yeah, without further ado, we'll get into today's featured presentation. And if you have questions along the way, please feel free to drop them in the comment section or in the live chat. I probably won't get to them right away, but we'll have time to go over your questions at the end. So without further ado, just wanted to take a quick foray into some statistics to sort of set the scene for today's presentation. So the first important statistic is 10,000 is the number of cardiac arrests that occur in the workplace every year. And now this is just in the United States. Across the globe, the number is even higher. And also, every 99 minutes, a worker dies from some form of work-related injury. And partially because of this, there's over $1 billion paid out in workers' compensation every single month. And that's also just within the United States. And so a big contributing factor to these accidents, to this workers' compensation and deaths, is cardiac arrest. And just by show of chat comment, do you all know the difference between cardiac arrest and heart attack? Because the terms get thrown around a lot, sometimes interchangeably. They are two separate things. So let me know in the chat if are you familiar with the differences between the two, or do you kind of use it interchangeably? I certainly used it interchangeably for years and years, but especially before working at Zoll. But it's a very common mix-up. Essentially, what a heart attack is you can think of it as being a plumbing issue. So a heart attack is when there's an obstruction in the arteries that lead to or from your heart, and these restrict blood flow to your heart. And so this can slowly build up over time, or it can happen suddenly. But essentially, it restricts oxygenated blood from entering your heart. And after enough time, with enough restriction, it actually starts to damage your heart muscle. And it starts to do myocardial damage that it never fully recovers from a heart attack. And this is something that it can come on suddenly, or there's also cases where people are experiencing a heart attack for weeks or even longer, and they have no idea, because that blockage in the artery is slowly building up, slowly blocking more and more blood. But cardiac arrest, on the other hand, is not an issue with the plumbing of the heart. It's actually an electrical issue. So your heart is surrounded in these electrical fibers, and they receive a signal that shoots across the entire heart tissue and instructs the heart to contract all at once. And that's what gets that powerful heartbeat that's able to send blood all the way from your brain to your toes. And when there's an issue with that in electrical system, it can go into what's called ventricular fibrillation, where instead of beating all at once and contracting the whole heart muscle, it just sort of spasms and hiccups, and it becomes unable to deliver blood to where it needs to go. And so this, when it affects someone, hits them instantly. The person typically won't even know what's happening. They'll just drop to the ground unconscious, because blood can't make it to the brain. You lose consciousness. And actually, the brain starts to take a thing. You can think of it as receiving damage after a very short amount of time after cardiac arrest occurs. So actually, when cardiac arrest happens, a timer is started. And for every single minute that passes without some form of care, your chance of survival drops 10%. And now EMS response time across the nation averages anywhere between 7 and 14 minutes, which is incredibly fast, and it's an incredible achievement. But if your chance of survival is dropping 10% every minute, even if they get there on the sooner end of that spectrum, that doesn't give you a very good chance of survival rate. And so because of that reason, the global survival rate for cardiac arrest, somewhere around 9%, extremely low. Depending on what sources you're looking at, you can find figures that are even lower than that, but around 9% overall. And there's over 350,000 occurrences that lead to death every single year. So not only is it incredibly dangerous, but it's incredibly common as well. And so that 9% survival rate doesn't tell the full story, though, because there's some places, there's some communities and some organizations that have taken that 9% survival rate and they've kicked it up from 9% to 24% survival rate to 56% survival rate in some instances, and even as high as 71% survival rate has been observed in some communities when it comes to sudden cardiac arrest. So what's the secret to turning that 9% survival rate on its head? Well, the answer is critical life-saving action from bystanders. Now, these are typically just regular people, often without any medical background or degrees, some even without training. And it's people who have the courage to step in and become heroes when they're needed. So that's why at Zoll, we like to say that anything can happen and that anyone can help. And that anyone is incredibly important because it's not necessarily about training. It's just about having the right tools that empower regular people to become rescuers. And so the twofold recipe for turning average bystanders into heroes is, number one, early defibrillation, and number two, high quality CPR. So in cases of cardiac arrest, the only true scientifically proven therapy for actually treating and eliminating cardiac arrest is defibrillation, which is the sending of a concentrated volt of electricity into the heart muscle. And since cardiac arrest, like we said, is an electrical issue within the heart, sending a powerful, concentrated, specifically dialed shock directly through the heart muscle is oftentimes enough to snap it out of that spasm and get it beating back to its regular heart rate. And the best way to deliver that shock is with an AED. An AED is an automated external defibrillator. And what's so important about them is they are simple, portable, lightweight devices that take all of the guesswork out of rescuing. So you take an AED off the wall, you turn it on, and it tells you what to do. It'll show you how to put on the pads. It'll perform the shock for you, and it'll perform the shock only if it detects that the heart is in a shockable rhythm. And then also, potentially even more importantly, is that the AED will guide you through performing CPR, which, like I said, is the second part of turning bystanders into heroes. So CPR, or cardiopulmonary resuscitation, is a life-saving procedure. You may have seen it in movies or TV, or maybe you've had the unique misfortune of actually needing to perform it on a real person. But essentially, it's taking both of your hands and performing chest compressions so that while the heart is fibrillating and unable to pump blood to the brain and to the body, your pumps of CPR will push on the heart muscle and push that freshly oxygenated blood to where it needs to go to hopefully and ideally prevent damage from occurring in the brain, because you're keeping a fresh supply of oxygen going to it while you're waiting for emergency services to arrive. And now, not all CPR is created equal. The American Heart Association actually has 5 rules for what high quality CPR is. And you're going to hear that term a few times. High quality CPR is CPR that meets these requirements. So minimizing interruptions in chest compressions, that means you want to keep the CPR going as much as you can. If the heart's not able to pump blood, you need to keep that blood going, or else the person experiencing cardiac arrest might, they might pass away, or they might have heavy brain damage. And so you want to keep the CPR going as long as it takes for them to become conscious again, or as long as it takes for their heart to beat again. You also really want to make sure that you're hitting the right depth and rate of CPR. So I think hopefully everyone has heard that CPR needs to be done at around 110 beats per minute. They often say the song "Stayin' Alive" is the one that you should use as a measure for what rate you should perform CPR. But also, equally or potentially more importantly, the depth is also incredibly important, because if you're not pushing down far enough, you're not compressing the heart enough to actually push the blood to where it needs to go. So you might be pressing on the chest, but the blood is only, making it to the base of the head or not all the way to the extremities. So you need to be pushing hard enough and deep enough that the CPR is actually pushing the blood to the entire body. And so the proper depth for CPR is 2 to 2.4 inches, which is about the length of, if you think of like a Hot Wheels car, like that is about how far you want to be pushing on the chest, which is very counterintuitive. And people who find themselves performing CPR in real life often have trouble reaching that depth because the chest provides a lot of resistance. And so that's something incredibly important to keep in mind, is not only that rate, but getting deep enough to push the blood. You also don't want to lean on the person because you're pushing down, but it's also important that you release up quickly, because pushing down pumps the blood and so does the release of the chest. So if you're leaning on the person between compressions, the chest isn't fully recoiling, and then you're not pumping the blood as efficiently as you can. You also want proper hand placement. You want to put it around their sternum. You could potentially break their ribs when this happens, but that's better than the alternative of having them pass away before EMS arrives, which is what happens in many cases with cardiac arrest. And then number 5, avoid excessive ventilation. Rescue breaths are not as important as chest compressions. And so when it comes to high quality CPR, it makes a tremendous difference in rescues. And a great story specifically about high quality CPR came out recently from a TV show set that was being filmed. And the show was Better Call Saul, which airs on AMC, the platform, which many of you may have heard of. And the main character, Bob Odenkirk, who's the lead actor who plays Saul Goodman, also played it in Breaking Bad, had a cardiac event on the set of the show and was rescued in an incredible stroke of events. So I have a short video just so you guys can hear it straight from the horse's mouth rather than me, tell someone else's story. But this is just an amazing example of how high quality CPR is an incredible difference maker.
And really be a sign of poor health, mental health. But
I have to go from that to this, which is in 2021. I remember where I was, but someone came in the room and they said Bob Odenkirk had a heart attack. I got in touch with Bill, and he told me, we think he's going to be okay, but it was bad.
We might have some streaming issues with the, looks like we might be lagging a little bit with the Wi-Fi. Gotcha. Okay, if this video is not able to load, then I will go back on what I just said.
I was turned out that you were completely out. You were out.
Yeah. It's a weird thing that happened. And so one of the tributaries to the Widowmaker got completely blocked, and I went out.
Were you in the middle of a scene, or
no? We were in a break, and it was during COVID shooting, so we were separate from the crew. And luckily, I didn't go to my trailer. If I'd gone to my trailer, I wouldn't be here, because they don't bother you when they knock. They wait for up to an hour,
right?
I sat, where we were sitting. Ray and Patrick were right there. I've told the story too many times.
Yeah, it's okay.
And this thing happened, and I went down. I turned gray right away, and luckily we were at the studio, and our medical officer was there, Rosa Estrada, and she came out of her office. She'd done 2 tours with the Army.
Wow.
She immediately did CPR properly, really well, broke my ribs. And the medical officer of the show, the medic, was there too, but he kind of froze up.
Yeah.
He was very freaked out.
Yeah.
And later apologized to me.
Yeah.
But he then also helped out, and they all switched off. Essentially, they weren't able to get an AED for 15 minutes. So because CPR was done so well, and because they also had that breathing mask,
Yeah.
you know, those two things, that meant that blood was able to
You're
get
getting
to my heart.
oxygenated blood to your
Yes,
to your brain.
and my heart.
Yeah.
So the heart starts to die right away, right? It starts to scar up and die. But because those other veins were feeding blood through my heart, the heart didn't scar up. So my heart has almost no scarring
That's
at
fantastic.
all
Yeah.
for 15 minutes of just people doing this. And then they had the AED, and it took 3 hits. Look, everybody was really scared for all legitimate reasons.
Yeah.
I'm super lucky, Conan. CPR was done really well.
Yeah.
3 people switched off because you can't do it if you're doing it well, you can't do it for more than 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, because you're exhausted.
Right.
So you need someone to hand it off to. So
Yeah.
there's 3 people who switched off.
Jesus.
And then this AED device, which every studio there has now, but at the time there was none in any of the studio buildings on the whole lot. But our Rosa had one in the trunk of her car that she'd been trying to return to her friend. She had borrowed it, and she had tried to return it, and her friend wasn't home, or it wouldn't have been in her car.
That's just in.
And her car was parked, you know, as those lots are huge, and she had to run to go get it. So it just, so many things happened that we're lucky. I have, and really be a sign.
So yeah, that was the clip. Honestly, is just such an incredible story. A few things stand out. First off, just as a point of clarity, I know we started off by talking about the differences between cardiac arrest and heart attack. One thing that I should have told you earlier on is that cardiac arrest is often the symptom of another affliction. And so in many cases, heart attacks cause cardiac arrest. And so you can experience both. And so what happened to Bob Odenkirk was that he had a sudden onset heart attack, which triggered cardiac arrest, and he collapsed to the ground. And now this is such a classic story of everything that could go wrong does go wrong. And then an incredible twist that then after that, everything that could go right does go right. So first off, he collapses to the ground, cardiac arrest, and is out cold. As you remember earlier, we were talking about that timer that started. Every minute that passes without care, your chance of survival goes down by 10%. And the medical director who's assigned to their set freezes up because the situation is just so overwhelmingly stressful that even with prior training, some people find themselves freezing up or unable to respond. And then the studio is not equipped with an AED. So luckily, at that point, there's another medical director who jumps in, starts CPR. And now, as Bob emphasizes, it's not just CPR. It was CPR that was done incredibly well because luckily someone had an AED in their car across a parking lot. It took 15 minutes for it to arrive at the scene. So if you think about 10% chance of survival going down for every minute that passes, if it takes 15 minutes to get an AED, you should be dead to rights. But it's that high quality CPR that Bob was receiving from the people on set that was making sure that even though his heart couldn't beat properly, there was blood going everywhere that it needed to, directing oxygen to his brain and keeping him alive while it was going down. And then they just so happened to have an AED that wasn't even equipped in the workplace. He said that the medical director had borrowed it from a friend and was trying to give it back and failed. So Bob says it best when he says so many things happened that were lucky. And I think it's incredible that this happened. It's incredible that Bob Odenkirk is still around, is such a generational talent. But the thing is, so many things happened that were lucky, but things like this don't necessarily have to be left to chance. The best way to equip your workplace for cardiac arrest is to equip your workplace with AEDs. And not just any AEDs, You want AEDs that will give you real-time feedback on the quality of the CPR that's being performed. So even if you don't have a medical background, you know that you're pushing hard enough to get blood to go where it needs to go. You know that you're hitting it at the right rate. And you know that if you're not doing any of those things, the AED will correct you and tell you how to improve. So to push faster, to push deeper, whatever it is. Like I said, Zoll is the largest manufacturer of AEDs in the world. We also make the only AEDs in the country, in the United States, that give you that corrective feedback on your CPR. Because high quality CPR, studies have found, is the #1 predictor of survival in cardiac arrest. So even though defibrillation is the only proven therapy, that CPR is what is going to best predict whether someone is going to survive when it comes to cardiac arrest. And so getting feedback on the depth and rate straight from the device is incredibly important. And you don't want to just buy the AEDs. You want to place them in highly visible areas where they can be grabbed by anybody who is working, anyone who witnesses a cardiac arrest event. So the AHA says that ideally you want to have an AED on the scene within 3 minutes of someone experiencing cardiac arrest. So that means in your facility, you want to have AEDs that are accessible within 90 seconds from any location, because then that gives you 90 seconds to run and get it, and then 90 seconds to get back in order to start performing the rescue within 3 minutes. And you also want to teach your staff about these AEDs. Everyone has seen AEDs in airports and schools and out in public, but not everyone knows when it's time to grab it off the wall. A lot of people don't even necessarily know what it does. They know that it delivers shocks, and they might think that it's just for professional rescuers, but it sounds like we might be lagging a little bit. So if my voice keeps breaking up, then just you guys can give me a heads up in chat, and we'll try and deal with that. But if you're teaching your staff if you're equipping your place with AEDs and you're teaching your staff how to use them, then you're creating an environment where anyone who's working, anyone who is on shift that day can respond to cardiac arrest and potentially become one of those lifesavers that we were talking about earlier in the presentation. So as a callback to earlier in the presentation, we do like to say at Zoll that anything can happen. And now, while cardiac arrest is a major killer globally, causes hundreds of thousands of deaths outside of hospitals, there's also a tremendous slew of other afflictions that can happen in the workplace that can lead to fatality. And the next one that I wanted to talk about is actually the #1 cause of death for ages 1 through 46 and accounts for about 1/3 of lives lost just in the US. And that is physical trauma. And so in the workplace specifically, there's over 5,000 workplace fatalities just from trauma every year, and over 30,000 preventable deaths. And the key word being preventable, because just like with cardiac arrest, bystanders have the ability to step in at the right time and become heroes and potentially save lives in those precious minutes before EMS arrives on the scene. And so the idea of bystanders being critical pieces of intervention when it comes to severe bleeding is more of a recent sort of thought. Essentially in 2012, following the shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary, a group of public health officials and surgeons and doctors convened with the goal of determining how more lives can be saved in the event of mass casualty events or in events of large-scale physical trauma. And so they met a few times, conducted tons of studies. Later, this group became known as the Hartford Consensus and sort of created this idea that bystanders have an incredibly important role to play when it comes to stopping deaths by severe bleeding. Because just like with cardiac arrest, by the time EMS arrives, it could be too late to save a person's life. And with severe bleeding in particular, it can become fatal in 3 to 5 minutes. So extremely quickly. And so saving lives will mean bystander intervention. And so partially based off of the Hartford Consensus came Stop the Bleed. And so Stop the Bleed is a United States program that was launched by the White House in 2015. And it's a public advocacy campaign that focuses on training everyday people how to treat life-threatening, severe bleeding injuries. And so as part of Stop the Bleed, they offer courses, they do a lot of public awareness campaigns, and they also created a special designation of trauma kit that can be called Stop the Bleed kits. And so that designation is based off of the United States wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And they use those findings of what the best bleeding control supplies are and set that as the standard for Stop the Bleed kits. So if you have a Stop the Bleed kit that's approved by the US Department of Defense, then you know that that's the same life-saving equipment that they're giving to troops overseas. And so here in the background of this image is Zoll Medical's trauma kit. They are called Mobilize. And so what's cool about Mobilize trauma kits specifically is that just like Zoll AEDs, you don't need to have prior training in order to use them. You just need to know to grab it off the wall and it'll guide you through the rescue. So sort of following that same logic that anyone can be a hero, Mobilize kits are guided by a smart app. And so this app is called the Mobilize Rescue app. It's downloadable on your phone by anyone at your company if you have Mobilize trauma kits. And essentially, you don't have to worry about the stress of the situation. You just open the app and you let it guide you through simple prompts that will show you how to triage, treat, and manage injuries in that precious time before EMS can arrive. And so it follows that same logic of you don't have to necessarily be a medical professional to save someone's life. Of course, training helps, but with Mobilize, you choose what is happening to the person, and then it'll direct you to the supplies in the kit that will be able to help them, and it'll teach you how to apply it. It'll teach you how to potentially save their life. And so this works for severe bleeding. There's also medical equipment to deal with things like allergy attacks. There's additional space and instructions for Narcan if you want to equip Narcan in your workplace and have smart instructions for how to administer it, whether it's the shot version or whether it's the nasal version. That's also built into the same Mobilize app. And so when you have an AED and Mobilize together, you're preparing your workplace so that potentially anybody can treat cardiac arrest, severe bleeding, allergic reactions. It'll teach you the Heimlich maneuver if someone is choking and they need to be saved. Some of the kits have supplies to help treat and manage broken bones. So it creates this environment of safety where if anything happens to anyone, that anything can happen, then anybody can help. And so most of you are facility managers. You're probably more than well aware that simply owning emergency supplies doesn't mean that they're going to get used or they're always going to be ready. And so the other piece of having a comprehensive safety program is having a program management tool. Because say you have AEDs, say you have a Stop the Bleed approved trauma kit like Mobilize, you still need to worry about tracking consumables, tracking who's trained, making sure that you have the right people on site, and logging all of your inspections across all of your devices. And it can kind of turn into a massive headache to manage an entire safety plan. But I will say it is these organizations that take program management deadly serious that see these incredible results when it comes to survival rates, particularly with cardiac arrest. As I mentioned earlier, in some instances, studies have observed cardiac arrest survival rates of up to 71%. And that was at a location that had really strict program management. They had well-informed staff. They stayed on top of their consumables. And that's most of the reason of how they were able to get such a tremendous survival rate. So one of the key aspects of having a good program management tool is tracking device readiness. Because across the world, about 1 in 5 AEDs, generously speaking, is not rescue ready. And it's an absolute tragedy to have someone who goes into cardiac arrest and needs an AED to have an AED that's available and then to find out that no one was keeping track of the pads and batteries and that something was expired and the device wasn't ready to perform that life-saving defibrillation. And this happens globally. Over 1,000 cardiac deaths have happened in around a 15-year period. And so there is a real human impact when it comes to readiness. And so in an ideal world, you want a smart device, one that is talking to the cloud and beaming its readiness information every single day to a central dashboard where one person can manage a whole fleet of hundreds or even thousands of AEDs and check that they're all ready just in one quick glance. And also, one thing that can be difficult about managing AED compliance is keeping up with legislation. So there's new federal legislation for federal facilities about creating safety stations. They specifically call out needing an AED, opioid reversal agent, and hemorrhagic control, such as stop the bleed. It calls out specifically. And those sort of federal laws make their way into state laws as well. And there's already different AED legislation for all 50 states in the US. Every single state handles their AED laws a little bit differently, and most states have a number of laws. So it can be a really big headache to stay on track of all of the legislation requirements within your state or within your country. And these different legislation pieces can come in many different forms. There's reporting requirements, there's definitions of liability, there's requirements for emergency action plans. And so just taking one state for an example, this is just one law that is in just the state of Minnesota that defines proper use of an AED program. And so I believe that there's 9 laws, don't hold me to that, 9 laws in Minnesota that dictate that specifically are about AEDs and AED programs. That's just one of them. So you want to have some sort of centralized dashboard that can break down all of the laws in a simple way, so you can make sure that you've bought all the right equipment, but you want to stay legally compliant as well. So it's great to have a program management tool because it can deliver you a dashboard that you can use to make sure that you're staying compliant. And one of the other benefits of program management is that you can keep track of your employee training. Now, I know I've said that training isn't necessarily required to use an AED, but there's tremendous benefits to having a trained workforce as well, not just because you need to have training to perform CPR. You really don't. But what studies have found is that people with proper training are more likely to step in when they're needed. So it gives them typically better performance, makes them more likely to stand out. And if you're managing a whole facility or maybe multiple facilities across state or country lines, you want to keep track of everyone who is certified in CPR, everyone that's certified to use an AED or perform first aid. And so a good program management tool will allow you to do that with all of your staff across all of your locations. Now, all of the features that I've been showing and talking about are available as part of Zoll's Rescue Ready services. So our main platform that does all of the things I was just talking about is called PlushTrack. There's also options for having people come and train your staff as part of Plus Learning, or there's also more premium options where you can send out someone trained and employed by Zoll who will come and actually manage the devices for you, swap out expired pads and batteries. Some version of that exists for any program management needs that you might have. And stuff like this is incredibly important, especially in this post-COVID era, because it's more difficult to schedule people than ever. You have people working remotely, people working out of the office. So having some sort of tool to help manage your trained responders makes life a lot easier. But then also having these proper tools that allow anyone, even without training, to perform these rescues can give you extra peace of mind that even if the one person at a specific facility who has training in CPR, if they're the one who experiences cardiac arrest, or they go home early, or they take a long lunch and cardiac arrest occurs, you can feel confident that your workplace is equipped with the tools that anybody can step in and become a hero. So when you have these right tools, You have program management that's keeping track of their readiness to make sure that they're always ready for the rescue. You have your employees trained and you're keeping track of your training. Then you're creating one of these environments where anybody can become a hero. And you're expanding your potential rescuer base when it comes to a severe accident from just the people who have prior training to anybody within the organization. And so, like I said at the beginning, we're Zoll Medical. We know that every company is different and has different needs. So we would love to hear from you, hear about your facility, hear about how you manage safety problems in your emergency action plans and ways that your life could be made easier. We would love to hear about it, and we would love to connect you with an expert who can give you all the guidance that you need and walk you through how to create a very safe workplace and limit liability and save lives and just take care of your coworkers. And so, yeah, that's actually the end of our presentation today. Thank you all so much for coming out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. It was nice having this conversation with you. And if you'd like any sort of follow-up, if you have questions that you want to take offline or you want to talk about your company, all of my information is here. You can reach out to me, ryan.bergen@zoll.com. You can give me a call. I'm also on LinkedIn. I got the URL that's just Ryan Bergen. So I would love to connect and just get to know you guys better, answer any questions you have. But with that, we have a little bit of extra time. So I'm going to hopefully tackle some questions that you guys still have remaining or maybe asked earlier in the presentation. So happy to help disambiguate anything. If you just want to drop your questions in the chat, hopefully we'll be able to get to all of them. And thanks again, guys. Gotcha. Okay, so it looks like we have our first question from Tom. Is it Voslo? Tom Voslo? I might pronounce some names wrong, so apologies in advance. So Tom is saying, what is the issue with expired electrodes and what defines that? Yes, so every AED needs electrodes in order to deliver the shock. They come attached to the device and they have a finite lifespan. So they have a certain amount of years that they're rated to last. I have some show and tell items here, so I'll kind of pull them up as needed. But this is the Zoll AED3. This is our flagship unit, and our electrodes are rated for 5 years. And so 5 years is the longest shelf life on electrodes that are in the industry. And so after that 5-year period, though, it's the adhesive gel that causes them to stick. Eventually, that adhesive gel starts to lose its stickiness and can potentially compromise the effectiveness. So if you have had your electrode pads, say for a Zoll AED, for longer than 5 years, then it might not be able to deliver the proper shock to have a rescue. So you need to make sure that all of your electrodes are within their expiration window to know that your device is actually going to function and work. And it's the same with the batteries. Our batteries last up to 5 years as well. So when you're managing your fleet, you want to stay on top of all those dates. And a good program management tool like Rescue Ready Services will have all that information for you and can send you an email when you're about to reach that expiration date. All right. Looks like we have a question from Sandy. So how often would you say we should have AED/CPR training? Great question. So certification length, I believe, depends on the organization that you certify with. So I would defer to their recommendation. I believe the American Red Cross, and they're the ones that first trained me in CPR and AED usage. I think that their standard training lasts for 2 years. So take their recommendation. You'll want to do retraining when you can, because these are skills that fade. And even like with professional rescuers that haven't performed CPR in a while, that training still fades. Like even if you were doing CPR day to day as part of your job, or if you were a nurse, that ability, like many others, will start to fade over time. So it's good to recertify as much as the certifying body recommends you do so. But it's also good to get some practice in and reps in when you can. Just every 6 months or so is just another recommendation that we have. All right. Any other questions? I'll just go ahead and jump in on a question that I receive a lot, and I just think is a nice point of clarity that I alluded to earlier. So a lot of what we like to talk about when it comes to AEDs is that you don't have to be a professional rescuer. And so often that leads to a follow-up question, which is, if we buy Zoll AEDs, do we no longer need to train our staff? And so an important point of clarity is we actually don't recommend foregoing training, because training provides a multitude of benefits, because training allows you to perform CPR more effectively and also more confidently. So people who have had prior AED training are much more likely to step up and actually use that knowledge than people that don't. But I will say that the devices are designed that even if training has not happened, then there is still everything is still user-friendly enough that you can still use the device. So the answer is, you don't necessarily need training, though training is truly only a positive to have. Oh, and so with mobilized, so next question, how many app licenses do you get with the trauma kits? Yeah, so mobilized trauma kits are the Zoll proprietary ones that I was talking about with the smart app. So you actually get 10 licenses for every single kit that you buy. So what we get a lot is an organization will buy the comprehensive kit, which is the largest one. It actually has a built-in screen with the app pre-installed on it. And then people will also buy several smaller kits to go with it. And for every kit that you have, you'll get 10 licenses for the Mobilized Rescue app that your staff can install, and then, hopefully never use it. But if they have to, then they'll be able to confidently perform a rescue. Let's see, we got one more. Have you seen any examples where good preparation really made a difference in an emergency? All the time. Like, it's almost like impossible to overstate just how often I hear of instances of preparation leading to positive outcomes. I will say the most recent one, and this was really cool, was me and my coworker Meg. We're doing a video shoot out in Waco, Texas for our Anything Can Happen, Anyone Can Help campaign. And we were at Baylor University at a soccer game. And so there were some staff members that were there helping us set up the table. And one of the staff members, who was actually a student at Baylor, recognized the devices because he went into cardiac arrest playing high school football. And because his school was prepared with AEDs on the sidelines, they knew what to prepare for. They knew that with contact sports, sometimes cardiac arrest follows. They had the proper device and training. And so they actually saved his life with one of our devices. So he didn't have any idea that, we were going to be kind of working and setting up together. And then all of a sudden, like, he's telling us this insane, unbelievable story about how, like, someone stepped in and saved his life. And it's just like, these stories are just unbelievable. And especially in this line of work, you just hear about it all the time. Like, this preparation pays off in dividends when it comes to leading to survival. Yeah. So I'll throw out one more call for questions, but I get the feeling that if you guys had any burning questions, you would be dropping them in chat. So I just wanted to say one last time, thank you all so much for joining. My name is Ryan Bergen. Would love to connect with you if you're interested in anything Zoll or anything safety, or just want to, get me on LinkedIn or become friends, whatever, just let me know. And with that, thank you so much, guys. And that's going to be it for today.